Welcome to Oh My Menses, a digital space dedicated to all things menstruality, periods, hormones, and cycle-informed living. Join me, Karinda, naturopath and fertility educator, as we explore topics that we probably don't hear about enough. From stories of menarche, birth control, and common period problems to menstrual shame, sex, fertility, and the moon, if it's about the human female experience, I probably talk about it. This is a place of sharing, remembering, learning, and unlearning, where we come together and reclaim our cyclical power. So sit back, relax, let's all connect with our wombs, and remember our brilliant cyclical nature. Hello, welcome to another episode of Oh My Menses. My goodness, it took me so long to hit the record button. I was just feeling so much resistance. Probably also factored in is that I want to do more video episodes like this, just so there's more content to play with. Maybe I'll post a bit more on YouTube. Some people prefer video. Some people, and if you want to listen to audio only, you have that option. But yeah, when there's a camera involved, there's a lot more factors, and that slowed me down a bit. Anyway, we made it, and here I am. Welcome. Before we get into the bulk of the episode, I think let's just land in together. And there is a fly in this room that has decided it's going to be a part of this episode as well. We'll see where that takes us. We'll just invite that energy into this episode. Siri, what's the spiritual meaning of a fly? Astrology girls be like. Anyway, so as I was saying, let's land together and just take a moment to check in with where we're at in our cycles. So wherever you are, just taking a deep breath and tuning in to anything that's present in your body, any vibes that you're picking up on, any energies or sensations that you're picking up on, and just having a think about where you're at in your menstrual cycle. And if you don't have a menstrual cycle, maybe just having a think about where the moon is at in her cycle, or where you're at in your life cycle or seasonal cycle of life. What the season's doing around you, depending on where you are in the world. And just tuning into that energy, and you might learn something about yourself. You might hear a message. You might receive some guidance that you can take into your day or your week or your month. And that might be useful. My cycle check-in is that I am on day, I'm going to say 18. It's either 18 or 19, I would say. Because my phone is recording me right now in a time lapse, so I can't check my app. About day 18, 19, I'm pretty sure I have ovulated maybe 2 to 3 days ago. So technically in my luteal phase, but still feeling like the end of that wave, the end of that fertile peak, still like catching some energy from that, if that makes sense. Maybe you know the feeling I'm describing. You've got like that peak that generally comes with ovulation, where energy is at its highest, confidence is roaring, feeling a bit more vibrant, radiant, outgoing, confident. And then like ovulation passes, and for some people or for some cycles, it can be a steep drop into a flatter energy or a different tone. And I think for others, it can be a more gradual, steadier drop where you're still like riding on those tails of ovulation. So I definitely feel like I'm riding some tails, and I'm feeling very grateful for that. And I'm noticing that just in how I'm like going about my day, in how I'm like talking to people at the shops or on the street, to my colleagues, how I'm replying to friends in messages, how I'm showing up on Instagram, just talking lots on stories, and probably explains why I'm in the energy to do a podcast at all. This episode is a client request. So the topic is all about smoothing out the luteal phase. Tips, strategies, concepts that you can use, that you can apply to your own cycle, your own life, to help make your luteal phase, your premenstrual phase, that little bit smoother, that little bit more easeful, perhaps a little less edgier. Before I dive into the straight up strategies, I think let's talk about like, why would I make an episode like this at all? What's the deal with the luteal phase? And I guess sometimes the luteal phase, not a lot of times, the luteal phase gets a bad rap. So this is the second half of your cycle after you've ovulated, just so you've got that context for like what we're talking about. After you've ovulated, the 2 weeks between ovulation having happened and your next period arriving. And there are a lot of hormonal happenings going on at this time. The main hormonal change is that because you've ovulated, you're now producing higher amounts of the hormone progesterone. And progesterone can play a really big role in mental health, emotional health. It affects your general metabolism. It affects your kidney function, heart health, sleep. It has a big role to play. Now, when symptoms appear in the premenstrual phase, maybe some symptoms that would be categorized under the topic of PMS, premenstrual syndrome, or perhaps sometimes even PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder. That's not just straight up because of the hormones doing their job. Those symptoms are often a result of certain external influences, sometimes internal, external influences that are impacting what your hormones are doing. They're impacting how your hormones function, how your hormones are being received by your cells in different parts of your body, and therefore affecting symptoms and behavior and what your body does as a result. Remember that hormones are just chemical messages. Hormones are just chemical messengers. They are produced by parts of your body. They then go to other parts of your body, usually multiple parts, not just one spot, and they send messages to your cells to execute a certain function, to do a certain process, make a certain protein, make more of this, make less of this, do more of this, do less of that. It's very rare that hormones, without any other negative factors going on, would start to wreak havoc on your body. It's usually an external influence that is putting a greater burden or demand on your hormonal activity. So when I work with clients who have PMS or PMDD or a rough luteal phase without any diagnosis, or maybe with a diagnosis, there's usually some things that are causing the hormones to be a little bit overreactive or underreactive. It's not the hormones in and of themselves that's the root of the problem. It's often things like nutrition, whether that's excess or deficient. So when I say excess in terms of nutrition, I'm talking about things like perhaps consuming too many refined carbohydrates, having too high sugar load in your meals throughout the day, maybe snacking too much beyond what your body actually needs. That then changes your metabolism. That can then dysregulate mood. It can cause anxiety, changes to your blood sugar response. And that comes with a whole lot of symptoms in and of itself. When I'm talking about, so that's just one example. I mean, another nutritional excess could be having a lot of alcohol at a certain time in your cycle, that puts a greater burden on your body. Your hormones won't be able to do their job as well if there's a lot of alcohol present, as an example. In terms of nutritional deficiencies, you might not be eating enough protein. So this is where things may be lacking, things that your hormones require for optimal functioning. Probably lack of protein is one of the biggest ones that I see in clinic, especially morning protein content for females. Across the board, we're generally just not getting enough protein in the morning, and hormones are relying on protein not only to be produced, but protein's really important for our tissues overall and for our cellular health. So remember, the hormones are one component of this little symphony that's going on. Our cells and our tissues are the other end of the equation that are receiving the messages from the hormones. So we want to make sure that really everything's functioning well, including our cells and our tissues, so that they can receive messages smoothly from our hormones. So protein's really important for that. Protein's also really important for muscle mass. The more muscle mass you have, the better your insulin functions. The better your insulin functions, the more stable blood sugar readings you have throughout the day. So there's less mood swings, there's less energy fluctuations, less sleep disturbance, better cognition. There are just so many things to do with blood sugar. And protein is a really big help when it comes to that equation. So that's a common nutritional deficiency that I see. And then we can also think of nutritional deficiencies on a micronutrient scale. So protein, fats, and carbohydrates are the macronutrients. Then we have micronutrients, which includes vitamins and minerals. What are some of the common ones I see? Vitamin D is a huge one that really detrimentally impacts your hormone health specifically. Then we've got things like zinc as a mineral that is really, really important for hormone health. That is one that can tend to be a little bit lacking. Zinc's really important in immune function. So it's not always, just as an example, it's not always a matter of you not eating enough of a certain food to get a certain amount of the nutrient that you're after. It can also be a matter of your body has a higher demand for a certain nutrient, and you might not have taken that account into your diet. So you might be putting enough in, but your body is using that nutrient at a faster rate, which makes it run out, so to speak, at a faster rate as well. So you need to be more frequently topping up, and this is where select appropriate supplements can be super helpful, even if you do eat a well-rounded diet. I actually did an episode on the nuanced naturopaths with my friend and colleague Julie, all about the nuance of supplements. So if you're interested in like the nitty-gritty of supplements, do you need to take them, busting some myths about them, which ones are good to take, how to find a good supplement, we cover it all in that episode. I'll link that below. So nutrition is one, excesses and deficiency. Sleep is another really good example. How much sleep you're getting, how much sleep you're missing that your body needs, absolutely affects how your hormones are being produced, but also how they're sending messages throughout the body. Movement is another really important one. Are you moving too much? Are you moving not enough? And one of the ones that has been much more prominent on my radar lately is light, your light exposure. That includes your exposure to natural light from the sun at different hours of the day, because there's different frequencies at different times of the day being radiated out from the sun that are really important to how your whole body functions. And there's a big connection with hormones there. And then on the other end of that spectrum, also considering your exposure to artificial light, which can absolutely compromise what your hormones are doing in your body, and especially in the realm of blue light and sleep. And you know what? In light of saying that, given that we are heading into the evening here in Melbourne as I'm recording this at 3:25 p.m, I'm going to put on my daytime blue light blockers. I'm going to give them a wipe first because your girl's a smudgy girl. Editing Karinda here to remind you that you can get your own blue light blocking glasses from blockbluelight.com.au. The link is in the show notes, and you can use the code Karinda, one word, for a 10% off cheeky little discount. Enjoy. So light, natural light that you're exposed to, artificial light that you're exposed to impacts hormonal health. I guess I'll also throw in nervous system regulation. Nervous system regulation impacts just about everything. If you are in a chronically stressed state, if your fight or flight mode is activated a lot of the time, it is an unrealistic expectation to hope that your hormones will be doing their job properly in terms of your menstrual cycle, in terms of your sex hormones, in terms of your cortisol levels, in terms of your melatonin production. Stress changes everything. Stress impacts every function of the body, every part of your body, every organ system in your body. And if that is a big theme for you in your life and your health journey, that should be addressed, not necessarily first, because like you can address different things at the same time, but it needs to be a priority because it's going to be having a ripple effect across the board. But I list those categories: nutrition, exercise, sleep, light, nervous system health, as sort of the major foundations, the major categories of things that can mess around with your hormonal activity, that can make your premenstrual phase, your luteal phase, a bit more of a rough time. The reason I mention these categories is because instead of jumping to, say, a herbal supplement or, I don't know, a product that an influencer is selling for, in the name of hormone balance, if you have any imbalances in any of those categories, nutrition, sleep, movement, light exposure, nervous system health, I would suggest working on those imbalances first before looking externally to any products to fix your hormones. I also say those categories because if we're talking about how a luteal phase can be rough, how PMS and PMDD can be aggravated, those factors are really, really important. So if you're on a journey with either of those diagnoses or just notoriously having a really hard time in the luteal phase, I am going to give some suggestions here, but please keep those categories in mind because chances are it's 99% likely that at least one of those categories in your life is asking for your attention, and that a couple of simple but consistent tweaks that you make to some of those categories could change your cyclical health, your hormone health, for the rest of your life. The longer I'm a naturopath for, the more people I work with, the more I'm realizing there is no secret magic product that will just work wonders for every female body. There's not even one really good evidence-based protocol that most females need to do to feel balanced in their body. The more I practice, the more I'm realizing that it's about these little simple things that we can do that add up over time that can make the most influence on our health. So just as a side note there, kind of deviating from my whole point, my goodness gracious, definitely feeling like I'm in the luteal phase now, not being able to keep myself on track. If you resonate with that idea of you are in this mode of seeking and you're hoping that there's one answer that's going to sort everything out, and maybe you've been buying or trying a few different products to try and feel more balanced in your body or to try and fix your PMS or your PMDD, my invitation is to come back to the basics of those 5 categories that I mentioned: nutrition, sleep, movement, light, and nervous system health. See and remind yourself what is within your control before looking to something externally. And chances are you're going to find at least a few things that you can do today for free that don't require taking any supplements or paying a lot of money for something, or even paying for an appointment with a practitioner, that will make a fabulous change to your health if you start to just slowly weave them into your life and make them a consistent daily habit. So, I've explained how the luteal phase can be more rough and some areas of life that you can work with right now to try and improve that. I've spoken about that in a very broad sense. Now I want to talk about some more like practical, but also some more conceptual, maybe hard to grasp ideas that can change your relationship with your luteal phase. And one of the things I want to stress before I go into these ideas that I have is that your intention matters in this process. In terms of wanting to smooth out a luteal phase, we're not wanting to bypass the depths of your luteal phase, because energetically, maybe I should say this first. Energetically, the luteal phase is a really, really potent time where emotions can be a little bit more raw. You might notice that you are feeling more feels than you usually would. You might notice that it feels like a dial has been turned up on the intensity of those feelings. And this isn't necessarily something to run away from. This can actually be a real gift where, thanks to the hormone progesterone and what it's doing in this time of our cycle, our sensitivity's turned up, so we're more sensitive. So we're able to pick up on things in our life, in our external environment, that may not be quite right for us. That our subconscious, that our psyche may be picking up on and sort of going, oh, that's not right. That's not really in alignment with our current being or like who we're becoming. Now, it's really unlikely that you're going to receive the message as clearly as that. What's much more likely is that you're going to have a mood swing. This information has been processed in your brain, detected by your nervous system in a matter of milliseconds, and the most obvious information you can receive from that is that you don't feel good. You might feel anxious, you might feel angry, you might feel sad, depressed, grieving. That's the main message that you're going to receive. That's the symptom that's going to appear. But it takes a lot of skill to be able to slow down your awareness enough that you can pick up on what your nervous system has detected a problem with before you feel the emotion as a reaction, right? It's more a process of, okay, nervous system detects something, brain does some things, body does some things, you feel an emotion. And instead of reacting out of that emotion, you just bring awareness into it and go, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling this. Let me do some reflection on it. Let me just maybe take a step back from whatever I'm doing, maybe take some deep breaths, maybe do a little meditation now to invite in some more balance, and maybe I'll journal about like what I'm feeling. Maybe I'll journal about if I can label the emotion, if I can feel the emotion in my body, if I can describe how it feels in my body. What sensation is it? Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Does it have a sound? Is it in a specific part of your body? Is that emotion associated with a specific memory? Also understanding, what is this emotion wanting me to do? What is the outcome of me feeling this way? That's a little sidetrack into like some deeper work that you can do with your like emotional balancing. I would almost call that like emotional alchemy. That sounds nice and witchy. And obviously the benefit of, if you did that, if we listen to our luteal phases and the emotional swings that can come up in our luteal phase, we would get so much out of it if we just took that introspective self-awareness lens and a little bit more of a curious approach of like, oh, okay, why am I feeling this emotion? Right. But for most of us, the emotion is overwhelming. The emotion takes over our being, and then we start to behave from that emotional place. And this is where the luteal phase really gets a bad rap, because what does that look like for most people? It looks like having mood swings. It looks like initiating conflict with your partner. It looks like being irritable to your friends and your roommates and your boyfriend and your girlfriend. It looks like feeling depressed that you're in bed all day. It can look like feeling just bleh enough that you don't want to get out of bed in the morning. It can look like feeling so angry that you are walking around with almost all of your muscles tense as you go about your day trying to appear normal. Hello, I'm not feeling anything. Let's just get on with it, right? And that's what makes the luteal phase tricky. I will say, oftentimes is our resistance to the feelings that the luteal phase is trying to bring to the surface. In trying to bring those emotional imprints to the surface, what our luteal phase is trying to do is help us process shit that we need to process if we want to live our best lives, help us come into full radical self-expression, not holding anything back, speaking authentically, feeling authentically. It also wants us to make adjustments. For example, if you are feeling the same emotion on the same cycle day, every cycle for like months in a row, that might be pointing to something in your life that needs to change, that is bringing up this consistent emotional pattern. Maybe it's something that in your present day life needs to change, or it might be an emotional imprint from the past and it wants you to process a memory. It wants you to work, perhaps do some therapy on a specific part of your past life so that you can move forward fully into the future. Thank you for bearing with me. I know I'm playing with a lot of concepts here. I'm really dancing between the science, the hormones, and also the spiritual, the conceptual, the woo-woo. And I really think these are the two worlds that we need to balance and hold and dance with and dance between to really have the most balanced experience and the most vital experience of our luteal phase. So this is why I'm sort of doing all this preamble, because it's a big topic and there's a lot of things that are happening. As another example, I guess I can share like my own story, but this could almost be an across the board example just because I see it so much. I hate to say it. If you are having the same fight, the same style of fight or conflict, or the same theme of fight or conflict with your chosen partner at the same time every month, and it doesn't feel like there's an actual resolution, and maybe it's a pattern of there's the fight and you process that however you process that, and there's tension in the relationship, and then you get your period and you feel a bit better and you kind of just go back to normal in the context of your relationship, and it doesn't feel like a big deal. But then the next cycle, the same thing happens again. I know a lot of women that this happens to, and on a witchy woo-woo, on a subtle subconscious, on a subtle psyche level, your being, something within you, is trying to get you to see a problem with the relationship. Now, this might be a problem with the relationship dynamic, something that can be worked on, something that can be compromised, resolved, or your being might be trying to show you something that isn't quite in alignment with the person you're with, about the person you're with, I should say. So I don't want to say it's like if you fight when you're premenstrual with your partner, it's doom and gloom. But I do just want to be maybe the rare person in your life who acknowledges like that could be pointing to a bigger issue. And I say that out of trust for your body and trust in what your hormones are doing. We're often taught to like criticize our hormones or like put them down or like blame them for like things going wrong in our lives or having an emotional freak out. The truth is like they're just trying to like help you. And it doesn't mean it's going to be an easy journey to navigate as your hormones are trying to help you. But it doesn't change the fact that they're not trying to harm you. They're not trying to make you feel like shit or create all this shit in your life. They're just doing the best they can. I would love to see the statistics on how often relationship breakups or initiation of divorces are in the luteal phase. Like, imagine if we were all tracking our cycles and we could look back at our life and go, oh my God, every breakup I've ever had that I initiated was in my luteal phase. Could you imagine? Oh my gosh. If I had to put money on that, I would say that most breakups that are initiated by a female would happen when they're in the luteal phase, when their subconscious has hit a threshold of like, we can't do this shit anymore. Maybe our mood swing, maybe our rage outburst, maybe our bout of depression every month isn't because of something within us that we need to deal with. Maybe it's a reflection of the choices that we're making in who we're living with, in who we're sharing a life with, who we're choosing to sleep with, who we're choosing to be with. So yeah, hate to be the bearer of that news, but single Karinda has got some news to share, and I'm not holding anything back. I love being single right now because I feel like I just am less tiptoey around these subjects. I'm just really happy to tell it like it is. Your relationship might be causing your PMS. That feels like a huge statement. I hope you guys can pick up on the nuance that I continue to lay down as I talk, and that I'm not just saying if you have PMS, break up with your boyfriend. That is because that is not what I'm saying. And I guess that's another thing, is that at that time in your cycle, your body and mind and spirit is wanting you to be honest with yourself. It's wanting you to face yourself in a raw, authentic, truthful way. And again, this might not be a conscious process, but if you're not ready to face that truth, it makes sense that, of course, there would be resistance. Of course, there would be tension. Your subconscious wants something. Your conscious mind wants something else and is doing something else. So there's a tension there. And the result of that is going to be something like a mood swing, or not feeling good, or feeling depressed, feeling angry, feeling irritable, feeling intolerant, feeling nitpicky, feeling complainy, having sensory overload. Like, of course, there's going to be a result of that inner tension, right? I'm really across the board here. None of anything I've said yet was on my notes to share. And I know that's why you chose to listen to this today, because you're ready and willing to accept me in my messy, authentic human form, rather than getting a really solid, structured, dot-pointed, indexed episode that is clear and concise from start to finish. I'll do those episodes for you sometime. Now's not the time. We're talking about the luteal phase, baby. We're getting messy. So, my original point that led me to share all of that is that your intention matters. So you've gone, I want to make this part of my cycle easier. I want to invite you to reflect on your intention behind wanting that, and to ensure that you're not using any of these tips or suggestions to bypass the depths of what your luteal phase wants you to feel, but rather you are looking for new ways to support yourself so you can navigate those murky waters with more ease. Not to bypass, not to avoid, not to run away. We've spent too much time doing that. We've spent too much of our lives being encouraged and shown how to do that by our teachers and our mothers and other family members. And we are the generation that is like, no, we're actually not doing, that's not how we do things anymore. Nah, I'm ready to feel and meet what my body is trying to show me. And how can I make that process easier for myself? That is the energy that I am infusing into this episode and the things that I have to share. I've been all woo-woo. I'm going to go back to practical now, and I'm going to start with some points on nutrition. How can you make the luteal phase easier for yourself? Step 1, think holistically about nutrition. Now, to do this, I want you to understand that metabolic activity increases in your luteal phase. This is because the hormone progesterone is only produced after ovulation. One of the jobs of progesterone is to alter your body in such a way that it is ready to grow and house a developing fetus. Progesterone wants you to be pregnant, essentially. And even if pregnancy is not your goal, something that I say to my clients a lot is that you can't escape your biology. Your body is always trying, well, I shouldn't say always. Your body is mostly focused on trying to get you pregnant so the human race can continue. That is just in our DNA. It's why we feel like having sex at all, ever. You ovulate, the hormone progesterone starts to be produced. This hormone increases your metabolic rate because there is more activity happening in your body. It's sending more blood flow to your uterus. It is thickening your uterine lining so that a fertilized egg could bury itself in your uterus and start to grow. It's sending more blood flow and nutrients to that area in case there is a fertilized egg there that needs that blood and nutrition and warmth, right? Because your body is also in this state of, we could be pregnant. We might have had conception occur this cycle. It also is requiring more nutrition. Generally speaking, everyone's going to be different based on like your resting metabolic rate, your basal metabolic rate and your activity levels, right? What kind of lifestyle you lead. But generally speaking, your need for calories, your need for nutritional input increases during your premenstrual phase to account for these metabolic changes that are happening. Your body's like, we might be growing a baby. We need more nutrition. We need more protein. We need more warming foods. We need a little bit more carbs. We need a little bit more fat. So this is biological science. This isn't woo-woo anything. These are just the facts of the impact that your hormones have on your female body. This is also one of the big reasons why we can't just take certain studies at face value when they say intermittent fasting is great and you should do it, because maybe those studies have been done on male bodies that don't have this monthly cycle, that aren't producing progesterone that is increasing their caloric demand, right? So we need to remember that we're female, we're cyclical, we have different needs than men. Our body is working with a different metabolic landscape at different times of the month. And if we can accept that, we've got a lot to work with. So acceptance is the first step. So how can you support yourself in that? Add a little bit of extra things to your meals. Maybe this looks like adding a tablespoon of hemp seeds to your scrambled eggs in the morning for a little bit more fat, a little bit more protein. Maybe this looks like having an extra egg in those scrambled eggs. Maybe this looks like having a mid-afternoon snack with apple slices with some nut butter, or seaweed snacks and avocado when you wouldn't usually have that in your day. Again, this isn't personalized nutrition advice for you. It's going to depend on your resting metabolic activity and how active you are day to day, week to week, cycle phase to cycle phase, and in your life in general. And I guess the other note there, if you're craving foods, if your appetite is stronger, if you find yourself eating more and you don't feel like you're hitting a point of like fullness, like you're not pushing past your body's threshold, you're just naturally more hungry and ready and wanting to eat more, don't put yourself down for that. We've also spent way too long doing that. It's such a waste of energy. And again, one of the reasons I love working with the menstrual cycle is that it's such a permission slip. Like, you understand your hormones, you understand the menstrual cycle, you can go, oh, I know why I'm more hungry. I know why I'm craving more chocolate, because I'm in my bloody luteal phase and my body literally needs more calories. My body is attempting to grow a baby here, even if it's actually not, right? That's what your body's working with. That's the belief your DNA is under. That's the goal of your DNA, I should say. So just give yourself that permission, that validation of like, yeah, I know why I'm feeling this way. And don't, oh my God, eating in general is such a big topic, but I would encourage most of you to eat intuitively and recognize where your body is genuinely wanting a little bit more, just so it can meet its basic metabolic needs, and not go, oh no, I don't normally eat this much, so I shouldn't be eating this much now. Like just remember, come back to that fact, come back to that knowing that you're a cyclical being, and your needs, your nutritional needs, your metabolic needs will change throughout a cycle. Another thing I want to say about nutrition is that it can be a really good idea to meal plan ahead of time. This is another one of the benefits of tracking your cycle. When you track your cycle and you know when you ovulate, you then know when you're in your luteal phase, right? You can use the energy that comes with ovulation and the first half of your cycle to prepare for the slowness and the fatigue and the lack of energy that you may feel in the second half of your cycle. So meal planning for this time is great. What sort of things do I like to meal plan for myself? So you get a context of my life. Sometimes I work where I'm up early, I'm out of the house, I'm doing a physical activity, and I tend to be hungry on those days, and we don't have time to just like pick up lunch wherever we are. I bring my food with me. Some days I work from home and eating is a lot more flexible and I can sort of cook as I go. For the days where I'm working out of the house, some things that I like to prepare for myself in advance are overnight oats. I would recommend avoiding plastic if we're talking about looking after your hormones. So using a stainless steel or a glass container or jar. I also make sure that I am stocked up with snacks, generally that are protein rich. So I'll make sure that maybe I've got a little bit more animal-based proteins in the fridge or defrosting from the freezer at that time in my cycle. I sometimes eat collagen protein bars. I'll make sure that I have protein powder that I can add to those overnight oats, or that I can have as a shake if I, when you hit your luteal phase and you might be getting a craving between breakfast and lunch, or lunch and dinner, or after dinner, a protein shake is a great thing to have on hand that can just help fill those nutritional needs. Some of my other snacks that I love to have in my luteal phase include I like getting the seaweed nori strips. They're like rectangle strips, just small ones, with a little bit of smoked salmon and sometimes like slices of avocado, and just like literally doing DIY pocket sushi. It's not sushi. I'm absolutely butchering the meaning of that word. And just having a few of those if I feel like I need a little bit more of a bump. Soups, stews, anything that can be frozen and then defrosted and be edibles, risottos. Yeah, risottos, soups and stews are something that I love to have on hand. Things that can be defrosted, heated, eaten. And one of the main reasons for this, beyond just needing a little bit more nutrition at this time of your cycle, also because if you tend to experience fatigue or low motivation at the time of your cycle, which is a very real thing. Scientifically, we know that can happen for a lot of females. In those who experience neurodivergence, how am I wording that? Yeah. In those that experience neurodivergence, maybe if you have ADHD, typically, and you have a menstrual cycle, typically in the luteal phase is where you can maybe experience lower motivation, and there may be more dopamine seeking. So the idea of cooking meals for yourself 3 times a day might not be so appealing to you. So that's a benefit of having meals organized and ready to eat ahead of time ideally in a textbook kind of way, maybe meal prepping in the first half of your cycle, closer to when you're ovulating and you've got more energy and motivation to do that. Then eating and enjoying in your luteal phase where you maybe have a lot of motivation to eat, not so much motivation to cook. Another suggestion that I want to offer that isn't in the realm of nutrition, there are going to be things that maybe you usually do at other times in your cycle that feel perfectly fine and easy to do, that are just going to feel harder or more strenuous or more energy depleting in your luteal phase. So first, having a flexible, open mindset in regards to schedule, routine, timing. The most ideal scenario is that you are in full control of your routine and everything that happens from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed, and including while you sleep, right? And when you can sleep. And you can chop and change that routine depending on where you're at in your cycle. So maybe your routine's a little bit more full, closer to ovulation, and you can scale it back to give yourself more spaciousness when you are in your luteal phase and your body is naturally slowing down, getting ready to menstruate, right? That's the ideal. A lot of us don't have that ideal degree of flexibility. So what do? We need to account for it. We need to account for how our body is going to be changing at that time. And with this, I mean plan ahead where you can. Schedule in, I don't want you to just see it as like, oh, I need to do less in my luteal phase. Another way of looking at it is to schedule in spaciousness. Again, cycle tracking is great because you can project into the future, especially if you're tracking ovulation and you know when your next period's going to arrive, not based on what an app's telling you, based on what you know of your body. You can project and go ahead of time, look at your calendar and go, where am I likely to be in my premenstrual phase? Let me take that into account when I'm booking things in. Let me take that into account with my work schedule. If there's, maybe you have flexibility in that you can work from home a certain amount of days a week or a certain amount of days in a month, versus when you have to go into the office. Maybe you can schedule those days for when you are going to be in that luteal mode a bit more. Maybe you've got commitments that are fortnightly or monthly and you can be flexible with the date there and you can go, let me schedule that in maybe when I'm not in my luteal phase, right? So cycle tracking, I can't recommend it highly enough. You can access my free cycle tracking guide if that's something you want to learn more about. The link is always in the show notes for that. It's totally free. So scheduling in spaciousness ahead of time. Another thing is that kind of pairs well with that is scheduling in sleep. Again, with those increased metabolic needs that happen when you're in your luteal phase, that also includes needing more sleep. So just like you need a little bit more calories, you also need a little bit more sleep because your body is doing more on a day-to-day basis. Your hormones are doing more. Schedule it in. Schedule in an extra hour tacked onto your normal bedtime. Can you schedule in a sleep in? Schedule in a sleep in. Can you schedule in a daytime nap? Schedule it in. Even if you don't end up sleeping, but you just end up like having that space set aside, blocked off just for yourself. Another example we can use here with routine. So I've spoken about like flexibility with work. If you've got it, like working from home versus having to go into the office. Another example is changing how you move your body. If you're someone who exercises a lot, does your body have the capacity to be as active as you usually would be at other times in your cycle? Do you have the same exercise regimen all throughout the month? Is there room to be more flexible with how you're moving your body to account for your luteal phase where maybe you don't have as much energy? Maybe the movement is going to be more detrimental and more energy depleting than it is going to be beneficial and energy repleting. Can you experiment with doing maybe more slow, strength-based and restorative-based movements? Can you do more yin yoga or hatha yoga instead of vinyasa yoga and hot yoga? Can you do more gentle Pilates on your mat instead of a full-on intense reformer Pilates class? Can you go for a long walk instead of a run or a jog? And obviously, you know, again, this is not one size fits all, but if we're thinking about our batteries and our energetic capacity, and we're accounting for this time in our cycle that we're going to experience that we don't want to run out of batteries in. These are just some ways that we can play with that. We can play with that level of charge that we've got in our batteries. So, and maybe thinking about it that way can be helpful for you as well. How charged are your batteries? This is great to like just tune in on a day-to-day basis anyway, but specifically, what is your general battery capacity when you are premenstrual? And how can you change some things that you're doing to make sure that you're not at 0% before the end of the day? Not necessarily even wanting to end the day on 0%. You know, we don't have to use all the charge we have, right? But how can you make sure that that battery is staying charged enough so that you're not wiping yourself out? And then therefore preventing yourself from getting into a cycle of burnout, preventing yourself from perhaps getting into a state of total overwhelm, perhaps preventing yourself from getting into a state of feeling totally depleted and you've got nothing left to give and all of your symptoms are flared up and everything feels like shit. This is where you have power to account for that in advance and attempt to holistically avoid those extreme states of imbalance. Something else that I love to encourage my clients to do at this time, and this can feel a little bit radical, like depending on your cultural background, your upbringing, and your current living context, use the people around you. Talk to them about your menstrual cycle. Talk to them about where you're at and communicate your needs. Specifically, I mean, communicate that in general. That's a great rule of thumb. But communicate what your needs are specific to you being premenstrual. This is really expansive in the sense of like how far culture has developed over the years to sort of be more open to menstrual cycle talk. But obviously there's still some like limitations and taboo there, right? There's still stigma. It's still not just not necessarily the easiest conversation to just pull up and say, hey, Mr. Manager, I have this cycle and I'm not the same person every week of the month. And at these times, I need more rest. On these days, I can't work overtime. On these days, I need to work from home. You know, that can feel challenging, right? So it can feel a little radical, but I especially recommend this in the terms of like having partners, having roommates, especially if you're like cool with them and like friendly with your roommates, or living with friends, or even living with family. Communicating to them about your menstrual cycle and maybe saying, hey, here's what happens for me at this time. Here's what my body is doing in this thing called the luteal phase before I get my period. I don't have as much capacity for cleaning the house during this week or during these few days. Can we make an arrangement where you can cover these chores during that time? And here's where I can make up for it. Or maybe just can I have a bit more support during that time? Great. To a partner, hey, I need more sleep during this phase of my cycle. I know we love staying up together and watching TV before we go to bed as a wind down routine. But on these days, at this time of my cycle, I'm going to be a little bit more stingy with staying up and I'm going to take myself to bed earlier. And you can support me in that by coming to bed with me or, you know, or doing another activity earlier in the evening so that I can still go to bed at a decent time. You know, and obviously these are just ideas, make them your own, customize it to your life. And, you know, even just simple like general statements like, hey, you know, even in the moment, hey, I don't have capacity for X right now. Can I do it later? Here's the date when I'll be able to do it. Can we talk about it later? Here's the date when I'll have the space to talk about it. Or I'll let you know once I have the space to talk about it. If, you know, especially from a nervous system perspective, just being really aware of like what pushes you over the edge when you're premenstrual, being aware of what things drain your battery faster during that time, and then communicating that. Hey, I won't be able to come out during this week because I'm going to be premenstrual and I need to conserve my energy. Or if there are things that you have to do, if there are social obligations, work obligations, supporting yourself in those ways that I've mentioned before, meal planning ahead of time, making sure you've got high protein, good quality snacks in the pantry stocked up, making sure that you're getting more sleep. Something else I like to do, if I know I'm going to be premenstrual and I need to be out of my comfort zone, I'll make sure that I'm well resourced. So I might meditate more beforehand when I usually wouldn't feel the need to. I might do more nervous system regulating activities like havening, self-touch. I might do an emotional freedom technique tapping sequence for more energy or for more social capacity before I go out. I will make sure that I'm physically well resourced in terms of I'll have water on me. I might bring an extra bottle of tea with me, so I've got an extra drink. I might bring a bottle of bone broth, so I've got some easy nutrition to have, to make sure that I'm not falling short with a drop in energy because I'm not eating enough, or maybe I'm out of the house for long enough that I need to account for a meal. So I'll make sure that I bring something with me. I might bring a protein bar with me. If there's, that's just how I think about things. I think, what can I bring with myself to this thing that I have to do, whether it's work or a social thing, to make myself feel more comfortable given my cyclical context, given where I'm at in my menstrual cycle. It can take practice if you're not used to thinking in that way, but I promise your brain is geared towards this kind of cyclical living, and it will get really easy really quick, and you'll just start to naturally think in these ways of that concert, let me see where I'll be in my cycle roughly. Oh yeah, that's going to be my premenstrual phase. I'm going to make sure that I'm sleeping a lot this week, that I may be bringing some extra electrolytes with me so I'm staying fully hydrated, and I'll have a really high protein breakfast that day and make sure to include protein throughout my meals for that day. And make sure I don't go for a run that morning like I usually would, because I'll be expending a lot of energy at night. So just seeing where you can play with the scales there in the context of your battery. And also think of the battery in the categories of social battery, physical battery, so exercising and physically exerting yourself, mental battery, so when you have to think, maybe you sit down for work, but it requires a lot of brain power. So be in touch with what your mental capacity is in terms of thinking, cognition, problem solving, and then also what your emotional battery capacity is in terms of emotional health, feelings, nervous system regulation. And I would invite you to just be aware, maybe for each of those batteries, you can maybe draw up a little thing for yourself or make a little table and go, okay, how does the capacity of each of those batteries change throughout my menstrual cycle? And if you don't know that, make that something that you start tracking. Even if you just choose 4 times throughout the month to journal about, how do I feel socially at this time? 4 times throughout the month. What does my physical energy feel like 4 times throughout the month? And just start to track that, so you get to know yourself a bit better. You get to know how your body and mind changes throughout your menstrual cycle. And start to write down some things that you've noticed fill and charge up that battery. When do you feel like you have a greater capacity of that specific battery? And what drains that battery? When you have that kind of catalog for yourself, you can then go, oh, I know what charges up, I know what drains the battery. That can then influence what you schedule into your luteal phase. So you know what drains you, what charges you up. So you might be able to schedule in more of those activities and events and rituals that charge you up and in your premenstrual phase. And you might be able to remove any additional events that aren't necessary, that aren't locked in obligations, that drain your batteries in any of those categories, social, physical, mental, or emotional, you might be able to get those out of your schedule while you're premenstrual. One of my general rules here, I don't really have rules. One of my general guidelines here, and again, this works hand in hand with tracking your cycle. Avoid overscheduling or overbooking yourself in your premenstrual phase. This can get tricky when you're ovulating and you have a lot of social energy, or you're feeling more excited, or you're just feeling really good and like everything's a breeze. And you're looking at the next 2 weeks and you're making plans with friends, you're doing catch-ups, maybe you're taking on more at work. You're like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I can pick up that extra shift. No worries. And then the next 2 weeks you're in your luteal phase, and that's when your energy starts to wane, right? And you're like, oh my God, why is my calendar so full? How did I book in all this shit for myself? So having that in mind, and so if you're in a mood for socializing and you know in your cycle you're around ovulation, you can't predict exactly when you'll ovulate in your next cycle, but the more you do it, the more you'll get an idea of how your body does work more consistently. So when you're in the mood for that, instead of planning things for the next couple of weeks when you'll be in your luteal phase, see if you can plan things in for a month. So you're just allowing that extra wiggle room, spaciousness in your calendar when you'll be premenstrual. And another note on that, and again, this can feel radical depending on where you're at. I know a lot of us may be recovering people pleasers, recovering perfectionists, and we want to make all the people happy. We want to do all the right things, say all the right things, not let people down, not disappoint people, live up to people's expectations of us, try to control how people feel about us. So we try to do everything right all the time and we neglect our own needs, etc., etc., etc. You know what I'm saying. So during your luteal phase, I want to invite you to practice your no, where it's realistic and doable, where there are things that you do not have to say yes to, where if you say no, it's not putting yourself in harm's way, it's not endangering anyone else, and it feels safe in a physical sense to do so. Practice saying no. This might be easier for a lot of you in your luteal phase where your mentality might be a little bit more irritable and intolerant and you don't want to put up with anyone's shit. It might be really easy to say no. But I feel like for a lot of us, it can be really hard at any time in our cycle to say no. If we're not used to saying no to people, that's just like a new skill we have to practice, right? So your luteal phase is a really, really good time with that. And also get real with yourself. Like, what are actual obligations? And again, for where there are actual obligations, I've listed a lot of different ways that you can support yourself and still show up for life and show up for the obligation. But get real with yourself with what's a real necessity. What are the things that I really have to go to? What are the things that I really must do? And, versus where is there room to say no? Where is there room to genuinely postpone and not screw anyone over and put yourself first for a change? And go, actually, I don't have the capacity for that. Can we do it next week? Or can I send you a message once my period's over and I'll be good to go again? Practice the discomfort. I get it, it's uncomfortable. It can feel hard to do because it's uncomfortable. And again, we're generally geared to avoid discomfort. Socially and culturally, avoid. But in the name of putting yourself first, I feel like that's a pretty good thing to practice. Practice your no. I think the last thing I want to say on this, yeah, we're nearly there, guys. I've nearly finished all my thoughts. The last thing I want to say is from the perspective of distress tolerance. This concept of distress tolerance and this sort of idea of like what our distress threshold is. Where is the line for you that separates feeling calm and balanced and in control versus feeling overloaded and out of control and imbalanced? So let's say you're premenstrual, you've got a lot on your calendar, a lot of it's unavoidable, you didn't meal prep ahead of time, you're not getting any extra sleep, or you're undersleeping to begin with, and you're feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Okay, you're feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. Can you view it as an experiment where you get to play with your nervous system, you get to experiment with your nervous system and gently expand your edges? So if your nervous system capacity, almost like picture it like an aura. Picture it like this kind of energy field that like expands from your physical being, from the edges of your body. And maybe when you've got a lot of capacity, it stretches really far out from your body and you feel like you can take up more space, you've got more space to move with, you've got a greater threshold. And maybe when you're premenstrual, that field is much closer to your body and you feel like there's not a lot of room for expanding. There's not a lot of capacity, it's a low threshold. How can you, and maybe visualizing this field in front of you will actually help, but how can you experiment? First, we're not trying to avoid the feeling of overwhelm and exhausted. Acknowledge that. Validate yourself. Yes, I understand that I'm feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, and here's why. And then practice seeing if you can just expand that. Even if you can expand your capacity just by 1%. Maybe you can achieve that by taking one deep breath into your belly, taking a deep belly breath with a long exhale, a deep inhale and a long exhale. Could that expand your capacity by 1%? Could that stretch out your field just a bit? What if you were feeling overwhelmed and exhausted and then you're like, right, I need to I can acknowledge this, I'm aware of this, I need to self-soothe. Do you have 2 minutes to take yourself into a bathroom, a toilet, your bedroom, a private space, maybe somewhere out in nature, to sit and close your eyes and take some deep breaths? Or do some self-touch havening, stroking your arms downwards, maybe stroking your chest downwards, stroking your forehead, stroking the sides of your face, stroking your scalp from front to back, stroking your legs, your thighs downwards. Does doing that for 2 minutes expand your capacity by 1%? If you even just take a moment, I mentioned, validating yourself. If you even just take a moment to write down, I love journaling via voice message to myself. If you take a moment to write down, I am feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, and then just write why. And don't even try to think that hard. Just go with what naturally comes up. Or the first thing that comes to your head, why am I feeling this way? And just start to jot down the reasons that you might be feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, even if the only reason on that list is I'm premenstrual. Does acknowledging that, does exploring where your emotions are coming from help you grow 1% more greater capacity? And even just doing a meditation where you visualize a field around you and just experimenting mentally with, can you push that field out just a little bit? Or you might not like to visualize it like that because at this time we want to conserve energy. So it might feel natural to you to want to have that field close to you. But can you visualize a cup filling with a little bit more water? Or can you picture a battery, maybe a battery icon with a bit more green charge? Maybe it starts off as red. Can you make it yellow? And then can you make that yellow green? feel free to get funky with it. This is the human experience. Oh my God, thank goodness we get to play and experiment with these things, right? How cool. How cool that you could visualize something and that it could affect how you feel. Bruh, that's alchemy, bro. If we ain't magicians, I don't know who is. So I think I do want to end with that point, because while I've gone through a lot of different ideas of why the premenstrual phase might be feeling more rough to begin with, what you can do to reduce that roughness a bit, how you can support yourself more, there may be times where we weren't able to avoid. There may be times where we're just beyond our capacity, where we are past our threshold, we are feeling an intense way. And again, the goal of the human experience is not to avoid and to run away from how we're feeling. So just taking that as an opportunity of okay, yeah, I'm feeling this way. Can I sit with this discomfort for one? Can I, even if I just for 1 minute practice sitting in this feeling with no agenda to eliminate the feeling, but just to sit with it, just to sit in the discomfort. Can that expand my capacity by 1%? Because I'm practicing that distress tolerance. It's about tolerating distress, tolerating discomfort. And I think that's a really useful skill to have as a human in a modern world where there is a lot of intensity, there is a lot of yuck, there is a lot of violence, and we cannot outsource our well-being to other people as adults. We can't guarantee that no one is ever going to offend us or hurt our feelings or push our buttons or, get on our nerves. So how can we take our power back and go, and take responsibility for how we tolerate distress? Because that's where the magic is, in my opinion. It's not about avoiding the bad things that happen in the world and the shitty things that people do that affect us. It's about how we can cope, how we can better cope with that. So I'm just going to put that concept in your consciousness, distress tolerance. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. I'm sure the internet will have a lot of great resources of how you can practice that in a way that works for you. In short, premenstrual phase can be rough. Your body has more needs in your premenstrual phase, in the second half of your cycle. There is more hormonal activity, there is more metabolic activity. You need more nutrition, you need more sleep. Remembering that your hormones aren't the things that are screwing you over. Think about the factors that impact those hormones. Remember those 5: nutrition, sleep, movement, light, nervous system. Keep those 5 categories in mind. Try to influence them first before looking for other fixes. Remembering to also acknowledge that energetically, spiritually, emotionally, the luteal phase is naturally an intense time. And it's not necessarily about avoiding that intensity, but more so about expanding our capacity for that intensity and being able to ride those waves a bit more smoother, not letting those waves crash over us, being able to ride them and surf the wave. Remembering intention, not wanting to avoid your feelings, not wanting to avoid what your subconscious is trying to show you or trying to communicate with you, coming to these approaches with an open mind, with a mindset of curiosity, with a mindset of experimentation, with a mindset of, I get to change my experience. And I get to feel the feelings, not from a mindset of wanting to avoid, how can I avoid the dips that my luteal phase gives me? We're not thinking about that. Supporting yourself with meal planning, making sure your pantry is well stocked, scheduling in spaciousness, scheduling in more sleep or a daytime nap, getting flexible with your routine, either slowing down your routine or taking things out of it where you can, getting flexible with your work commitments if that is possible for you. If it's not possible for you, supporting yourself more with making sure you're well resourced emotionally and physically during those times. Avoid overscheduling yourself during your luteal phase. Cycle tracking helps a lot with this. And voicing your needs, seeing where people can offer you help, more support, so you have more spaciousness and you don't have to be doing all the things, running around like a headless chook, feeling worse than you have to feel at this time. And practicing distress tolerance, practicing expanding your nervous system capacity during the intense moments, even if it's just by 1%. That's a summary of what we covered today. I used a lot more words to go through those concepts, didn't I? I could have just said that summary the whole time, right? Anyway, I trust that I said all the words that needed to be said for you to receive the specific medicine that will most benefit you at this time in your life. I'm sending love to you and your cycle, and specifically your luteal phase. And if you're in the luteal phase now, I am picturing you riding that wave nice and smoothly. Yes, the intensity's there, but you've got this. And if you're not in your luteal phase right now, I hope that even if you just take one thing that you can play with, experiment with, try implementing for your upcoming luteal phase. Maybe now is the time for you where you do some meal prep and bulk cook some things to freeze to then defrost when you're premenstrual. Even if it's just one thing that you take from this episode to go, I'm going to try that in my next premenstrual phase. I'm sure it will make at least 1% of a difference. And I hope it does. I hope it makes a lot more than that. May this be of benefit. I'm sending you lots of love. If you have any episode suggestions, any topics that you want me to cover, reach out to me on Instagram at karinda.holistics, links below. You can also email me, hello@karindaholistics.com.au, links below. See you in the next episode. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Oh My Menses. If you have a special request of something you'd like to hear me talk about, or you have any questions that you want to ask me, please drop me a line at hello@karindaholistics.com.au. I would like to acknowledge the land and country on which I live, work and create, that of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I honour their connection to land, sea, flora and fauna across this country. I pay my respects to the elders of these communities, past, present and forthcoming.